Therefore, we call this Jung at HARP. And these are conversations where we come up with a question that we want to explore together. And then we explore that together for about 30 minutes. And that's what we will be doing today, talking about the pause effect, the pause in music that gives musicality, the pause in an emotional situation that gives us time to respond, and probably some other pauses, Kathleen. So this started because I had an experience this week or a week ago where a really important friend of mine died very suddenly, and I've had deaths in my life since I was a little kid, and I kind of just went into hiding instead of like stepping out and really showing up in the memorial and being present. And we were talking about that pause of when do we kind of reach out, when do we keep going, and when do we need to step back, and when do we just need to breathe into something. So Kathleen, I know you had a lot of things to say about this, and I would love to hear them.
Yeah, part of how we got to this topic is the whole idea of how pauses create space.
Mm.
And that, I've heard various harpists and musicians say that the music is what happens between the notes, that it's the spaces where the
Right.
actual music, the pauses in actually doing something. And our culture is so on go all the time. I know my schedule, I wake up and there's appointment, appointment, appointment. And how we tend to make space for ourselves and pause, I believe is where our life also happens, just like music happens between the notes.
Mm.
Our life is happening between the actions, which I'm playing with in my mind, like being the strings we pluck. If
Well,
you're
yeah, it's really interesting because as you're saying that, I'm thinking about something that I talk about a lot. Let's see, this isn't on. Let me turn this on. Um, something that I something that I think a lot when I talk, when I think about music, and when I teach music, is that there's a listening. And with the harp, which is such a resonant instrument, the harp is a percussion instrument, which means that you play it, it rings. You would have to stop that in order for the ringing to stop. And so there is a listening that happens where I can listen to the instrument, and I will be touched by the harmony. And if I had a preconceived idea about what I was going to say, or what I was going to play, or how I was going to sing, I wouldn't have this conversation with the music. So there's a listening along with playing. And one of the things that I've really been exploring and teaching lately is improvisation through these little snippets of ideas. So that was just actually 4 or 3 snippets. It was this, I was in the Mixolydian mode. I was just playing a harmony that really brings that Mixolydian mode out. So there was that if I pause, I begin to hear into it. And then I knew that there was another little tiny little snippet that I would love coming after that, and then a third that would take me back to the first. So I'd set up a structure ahead of time, or some ideas that I could play with, but then it's the pausing and the listening. And it just occurred to me that pausing is pause, but it is a pausing to listen?
Well, definitely, if we're going to listen, we have to pause. And part of what gets paused is our mouth moving, but also our head with its thoughts, that chatterbox, has to take a pause so that we can really we can receive. It's an interesting thing because when we think about pausing, various spiritual traditions work with the breath in different ways. And in my fundamental embodiment processes circle, that is the spiral 2 and 3 after you go through the essential embodiment practices, we work with the breath in different ways when we are undergoing different psychological, emotional, and real life experiences. And one of the breaths that we work with is breathing in, let's just say to 4 heartbeats, holding that breath for 4 heartbeats, breathing out to 4 heartbeats, and then pausing for 4 heartbeats. And if you've ever been with someone when they're sleeping and you've noticed their breath when they're sleeping, there is kind of a natural pause that happens physically.
The one where
And
you're afraid that, wait, are you still alive?
yeah. I mean, and so our culture does not value the pause, but if you think about it, a lot happens in the pause. And with the breath, there's something that's happening physiologically in that pause. With music, when we're listening and we are pausing, not figuring out where we're going next, but we're listening so we can respond in a much more organic, whole way than just, oh, this is where I want to go next, because that cuts a lot out. This having the plan cuts a lot out,
Right, right.
and there's a time for that. I mean, it's not that that's wrong. We need that, and we also need those moments where we don't know and we're pausing to listen so there can be a more organic response. And that organic response is going to be informed by all of what we know about, whether it's what we know about ourselves in a particular situation and waking life, or it's what we know about, music and what is going to give us the sound we're after. There's, but it's not, it's what comes together in that pause and that moment of listening and receiving.
Right. I'm fascinated by what you're saying. I'm thinking of a couple of things. I'm thinking of, as I noticed, especially I started learning this instrument when I was an adult, and I had to learn really fast. And I learned, and I wasn't fast. I mean, coordination doesn't happen fast. And so I was constantly, feeling like, oh my, I have to work twice as hard as everybody else to be half as good. I mean, I just remember feeling like, when am I ever going to be able to play like the other people in the orchestra with that kind of facility?
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered that I could speed up my learning by sleeping, meaning
Yeah.
whenever I took a nap, something something would coordinate in my brain, or it's almost like I was trying to put two things together, like two hands, or coordinate something. I couldn't. I would go to sleep. Something would happen when I was sleeping that got them closer together. Then I'd try again. So that pause of sleeping is, I began to understand that, and how that works. I don't use it as much today. I wish I did. And then I was also thinking, when you were talking about, with this particular, or with this is just it's a like a prompt that starts the instrument singing, so that you can then listen to it, so that you can take a pause. But then I know that when people are just learning, they're like, but I'm going to play this note, and it doesn't sound good. And so it's also great to have some, I know that I can start with just going back and forth between these two things to get settled. And I can take space between each and every part of it. And the harp is especially gracious about that, because just that.
Yeah.
Each note brings, more of an understanding of that particular harmonic mode. So having what you were saying about not having to worry about, am I doing this right? What happens next? And I'm in a situation like that. I'm learning something new, and I'm just constantly feeling, am I saying this right? Am I supposed to? I used that wrong word again, and blah blah. And it just makes me muddled. And someone came and helped me and kind of made my agenda simpler, and I realized that that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make a simple, creative agenda so that you just have a few things to work with. And when you get to the point of like, I've done that too much and it just feels like too much, okay, then go here. Just go to that. And then you can come back. But you have, it seems like I need something in creative expression, and even just in any kind of life expression. I need to have something I can ground in, breathe into, pause enough that I can hear, and then have some simple choices that help lead me. Yeah, a master could be like, yes, you could go anywhere, it doesn't matter, or just do anything. But when I'm first learning, I need some real, try this, try this. Now, how does that work with like grief?
Well, it starts by coming back to the one constant that we have, which is our body and our body
Mm,
mind. So
mm,
when we are moving through difficult, and by difficult, I mean emotions that challenge us, and grief is often an emotion that challenges us, and loss, then coming back to the body, and the best way to come back to the body is to pause, to stop, and follow your breath. Let your breath lead you back in to your literal physical body, as well as into all of what some people talk about as I'll just call them the invisible bodies. What's going on for us emotionally? What's going on mentally? The energy workers will tell us that our energetic magnetic field extends out at least an arm's length all around us. So we get lots of information from that field, and there's a wonderful book now, the Extended Mind. It's either Annie Murphy Paul or Annie Paul Murphy. Annie, if you're watching, you can put it in the notes for us. But she talks about how science now is showing that thinking is not a function of the brain. It's more than that. That movement, even hand gestures, are important for thinking. So when we're at the harp, there is a thinking that's non-cognitive that's happening as we are moving our hands and dancing on the harp with our hands. So coming back to the body and with our emotions, the breath and pausing to just don't focus on anything else but one's own body and body mind is very powerful, because as you experienced when we sleep, and science again documents this, that there is a reparative and a restorative process that happens within the body that affects all of our functioning. And so if you want to learn something, if you review what you want to learn, either say watch a video of what you want to play, go through it in your mind and visualization right before you go to bed, your unconscious will work to set up that, I'm going to talk about it this way, those matrices in your body so you can do that the next morning. So sometimes
now,
when people say if you have a problem, sleep on it, it's because
right.
there are processes that are going on our behalf. Jungians, we talk about it as the unconscious. The unconscious is working on it while our consciousness is resting.
So this is two things are just really jumping out at me in what you've said. First of all, the
Mm-hmm.
constant of the breath, and I think about that again in improvisation, or and building on into even Beethoven, meaning like like composers will use a constant that they will come back to, or even ba 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 bum, that becomes a constant that gets used in all kinds of different ways, but you keep coming back to it, and emotionally you keep coming back to it. And when you come back to it at the end, there's an incredible sense of return. And so it's a combination of massive structure plus little tiny structures. So I'm thinking about, in this tiny little world of improvisation, two things that you said that really struck me: the constant. So in this, that's a constant. You may come away from it, you may build things that come back to it, or I'll build a structure that wants to come back to it. But the other thing that it really made me think of is there a way to go to sleep right there for a second, and or to have whatever happens in sleep or what happens in pause, like how can that even be more of a, how can I get more, how can I have this sense right in this moment that that's a dimensional door. I mean, I don't want to get too woo-woo, but it's a dimensional door,
Yeah.
and I can walk through that doorway and I can be somewhere else, especially with a harp, because of its, its resonance, and that it's resonating to the breeze coming through, which is this, and it's resonating all through itself. So it's still singing, even now, fading and coming back. So what do you think about that, Kathleen?
Well, I think what you're talking about is slowing down. And I cannot remember, but there was some famous pianist who had finished playing a piece at like this breakneck speed. And when someone asked him how he played that fast, he said, when I learn it, I slow it way, way down. And I practice it slowly at like almost a dragging speed until my fingers have it. Then I speed it up. And I think that the lesson I took from that is that we somehow think we're going to get something speeding around and going fast. And okay, so I can't take 5 minutes to get the constant. I have to run into something else. And then we struggle. But if we take the 5 minutes, I'm just pulling that number out of the air, to get the constant, i.e., with myself when I have a wave of sadness about a loss, if I can just give myself 5 minutes to check in with myself, with my breath, to breathe and listen to what's going on inside of me, and listen to what I need in this moment, then I can move in a way that's going to be much kinder and loving to myself, and much more, I believe, effective in everything I'm doing. But we tend to not take that 5 minutes. And I think it's the same thing with the harp. We to pause and not feel like we've got to, the old saying of you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You can't eat the whole thing at one time. And yet we have this idea we should be able to. And
Wait a second. Can we stop talking about eating elephants? Anyway,
okay.
no. So let's just make a different one just for fun. Like we wouldn't. Sorry, I just it's now that's in my brain. Like, is the elephant alive? Does it care if you're eating it? Like, are you using a spoon? Like, okay. So all right. So, but okay. What I'm hearing you say is you while you can conceive of a whole piece, or you could you if you can actually play it one note at a time, and if you can listen, if I can listen to that, and if I practice that slowly, well, the problem is then I get faster and faster and faster the more connected I get. But if I can allow myself to, and I can also embody it. And I'm thinking about, many years ago, I read a book called The Soul of the White Ant. And it was really, and also I've read a lot of books about the mind and where the mind is, and talking about the mind being in the body. And of course, I've been fascinated about that my whole life, because I work with my hands. I think with my hands. and until I get my hands on something, I can't think. And so I'm thinking that so the question was the pause effect. To actually pause and hear something. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, I see, it allows us to have a completion. And in a sense, when I play that, I'm playing into it.
Yeah,
I'm not doing the next thing that follows it, but I'm actually listening to it and playing into it. And then I just realized that the pause is allowing there to be not just a thing, but a thing that then that thing causes, it resonates with the next thing. And then there's music. There's music in life and not just a series of notes.
Yeah. You know, I had shared that my folk musician husband, sometimes when we're listening to music, he'll say that song breathes.
Uh-huh.
And I've been curious over the years what it is that he's hearing. And so I've been listening for that. But there's something about the natural breath again, that it rises and there's the pause, and then it goes down and there's the pause, and that moving into instead of charging ahead over. And our life, we often charge ahead over ourselves because there's the next thing on our to-do list, or there's the next appointment on our schedule. And in the process, instead of moving into our life, we just run over ourselves because we've left ourselves out. We don't know what we're feeling. We have no idea what our need is. We haven't made room that, okay, today, yes, I have these things I'm going to do. And in the landscape of my psyche today is this acute grief because I'm a little adrift that this person died.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the landscape of my psyche today is this kind of unrest because I'm struggling with this decision. We tend to charge ahead, leaving all that behind, but we really don't. It's bouncing along behind us. And it's the proverbial albatross around our neck. The way it's not the albatross is when we acknowledge it and we move forward with it. We bring it forward. And in music, there is a way of bringing forward that movement forward of the story that's being told through the notes of the chords, or of the feeling that's being expressed. But it's not a leaving behind and having bounced behind what's gone before. And we all have been socialized to kind of let our emotions and our own felt experience bounce along behind us. And then we feel tired, we feel exhausted, we feel distracted, we feel, we dissociate because so much of us is not here. It's back here.
Right, right. As you're talking, I'm just thinking about the power again of improvisation in these small forms that I've been exploring for the last year, and I've been exploring them in part because of the request of my of the members of the Academy, who started requesting small snippets to improvise on, things that they could immediately start exploring within 30 seconds. And then together we began to discover that that's all about discovery. So you immediately put something into practice that allows you to discover. And that's going back to what you said about moving into something, setting something up. If it's just that, I'm moving into this harmony, I'm bringing it along, and everything that I felt before is coming with. I'm dancing into this harmony, and I'm allowing. It's just a little time. I mean, it's like put your finger on F and do these two things, do these two simple things, and then see what it opens up for you. And what it opens up in the pause, what it opens up in the listening. The other thing is that I came to the word, and I don't know exactly what I mean here, about completion. When I listen, there is a completion and a moving forward when I'm taking it forward with me. And I'm not alone when I do that. I'm actually with me. And I can allow those pauses.
You you said something, and I think this is the perfect thing to end with, is that when you pause, you take you with you, and we do. That's the key in our life. If I can pause when we finish before I go on to the next thing on my schedule
Mm,
and just check in with me. And for
mm,
me, and in a very practical way, often the way I do that between appointments is I go to the bathroom, I wash my hands, I get a drink of water, I step outside and get a breath of fresh air. But I check in with what's happening in my body now.
mm,
Because if we want to talk about we have our physical body, our emotional body, our mental body, and our spiritual
mm,
body, they all are operating on a continuum. They all occur simultaneously. But if we do not consciously acknowledge them, that's when things get left behind. And so if we pause, we can take ourselves with us. And then we're in our life. We're in our music.
yeah, and as you're saying that, I was thinking it's the difference between letting that resonate and actually being in that resonance. And I hate to do this to you. That's what we do. we
Yes.
we mute it when we don't allow that pause, that resonance, to actually, for us to hear that resonance of our lives. And 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 the pause effect is the listening, the completion, and then moving forward into almost being, not being propelled, but being, kind of dancing together with our lives forward.
Dancing together is
Yeah.
perfect. That's such a beautiful metaphor. I often use that in my embodiment circles. That how do you dance with that feeling instead of fighting with it?
Right.
How do you
Right.
dance with that thought you want to get rid of instead of beating it to death and it beating you back? you know, it's that
Beautiful.
learning to move
Yeah.
with, and
Yeah.
there's a lot to be said for, again, pausing to just even notice what's in your emotional body. That's just going to be there with you today.
So let us pause now, since I know it's time for us to
Yeah.
both go on to our next thing and pause into it and take ourselves with it. And so this opens up so many more things to talk about, Kathleen, as our conversations always do. And I look forward to seeing you again next week and taking a slight pause as I resonate to what's happened today. And thank you everybody else who's joined us today and who will join us in the future for Jung at HARP. Thank you. And I will go off and harp on the good things in life.